Hey guys, so today we're making turkey meatballs. I don't have a recipe for this particular meatball, but there will be proportions in the description below, and then I'll work out the proportions to the points, the Weight Watchers Plus points or calories for your typical serving or per meatball at the end of the video. So this meatball is a combination of ground turkey thigh and breast, and it's going to be gluten-free because I'm using breadcrumbs from a loaf of gluten-free bread that was starting to go stale on me. And when that happens, I just throw them in the freezer after running them through my food processor. So the thing to keep in mind is that while the ingredients you have on hand may not be exactly what I've got here, I'll kind of give you the rule of thumb as far as meatballs go, and you'll be able to mix and match however you want to do your particular meatball. Now, the meatball we're doing today, other than just being turkey, and the obvious being a bread of some sort, we've got gluten-free bread here, we've got onion and garlic, but then we've also got an herb or some sort of flavoring that you're going to add to the meatball so it's not just meat, and it's usually a green herb of some sort. Sometimes it's just going to be parsley and some Parmesan cheese for an Italian meatball. It could be with pork and beef, could be straight beef, it could even still be turkey or chicken. I happen to have some fresh cilantro on hand. These are going to be a bit more of an Asian or a Thai style meatball. And the sauce that I'm going to be doing along with it is going to be a peanut Thai sauce with lime and some sesame oil and a little bit of sambal chili in it. So we'll just kind of start assembling this. We're going to get everything into the bowl and mix it and get it into the oven. Alright, so I've got just a little shy of 2 pounds worth of ground poultry, so turkey thigh and turkey breast in this case. And to that I'm going to add half of a medium-sized sweet onion. It's going to be just about a full amount worth of a small yellow or a small white onion. And about 3 cloves worth of garlic, just because we really like garlic. Standard measure, you'd probably be looking per pound about half a normal onion and probably 1 clove of garlic. Now, in this particular situation, chopping it isn't really necessary. We want this to be fairly small. We want it to be able to cook quickly because our meatballs are going to be in the oven for probably less than 15 minutes. So we want the onion to cook through. We don't want crunchy onions in our meatballs. So I'm actually going to run this through my box grater. Now if you've got a mandolin, and I use a mandolin whenever I can, it just happens to be in the dishwasher at this point, I like using the mandolin on a really small dice. They end up coming out about the size of a tapioca pearl. That's usually what I do for meatballs, but it's dirty, so I'm going to use my box grater. So we're going to get this in with the meat. Alright, so now that I've stopped crying, fortunately the box grater makes pretty quick work of the onion. I've also grated my garlic using the small planing side of the grater. So I used the large side for the onion. I gave it a quick rinse so that I could get some of the sulfur and the juices off of the grater, and then use the small side to get the garlic done. And that's in there. So we're going to toss in our breadcrumbs. Now per pound you're looking at between 1.5 and 2 slices worth of bread per pound. So I've got about 3 slices worth of bread left in this bag. It was frozen and it was stale bread, so this works really well. The purpose of the bread is going to provide filler, but also to hold on to some liquid that we're going to add. So we're going to get that in there, and then I'm going to add some milk. In this case, it's going to be some almond milk. It could be soy, it could be regular milk. It doesn't need to have fat content. It could be skim. And we're going to get that tossed in here as well. Probably about, I'm going to start probably with about 1/8 of a cup. And if we need to add some more, we will once we start mixing it. Alright, so I've got about 1/8 of a cup worth of milk in there now. I've used so little because I'm going to be adding some other liquids to this. So we're going to be adding some Worcestershire, a little bit of salt, pepper, our herbs, and then eggs. So one of the challenges some people have with eggs, obviously, is sensitivity to them. So some people prefer to use egg whites. Some people would use an egg substitute. Now, in this situation, we're using poultry, and it's lean. This is turkey, half breast, half thigh, but still very lean. The yolk from the egg goes a long way to adding texture and richness to these meatballs, since we don't have fat or a lot of fat in the meat like we would if it was a pork or beef. So while you might only use one yolk, but 2 egg whites worth, I'm going to end up using 2 regular eggs, and the rule of thumb is that per pound you use 1 egg. And that's what I'm going to do in this particular situation. You could use egg white only. It's going to act or help with binding and retaining moisture. The yolk really is for adding richness to them, since there's so little fat content in the meat. Alright, so as far as herbs go, I mentioned I'm using just fresh cilantro. I had it on hand from another recipe we did earlier this week. And salt and pepper. Now, you could be using any set of combination herbs. You could be using parsley, you could be using basil or oregano, some savory, sage. You could even go with spices like coriander, or you could use caraway seeds, and it would end up turning out more like a Italian sausage style meatball. Lots of options. In this particular case, we're having it with rice. I'm making a Thai peanut sauce to go with it, so cilantro is a really good fit, especially with a bit of citrus like some lime or some zest in there. So I'm going to add a pretty hefty portion worth of cilantro in there, and salt and pepper. Now, salt is a bit of a tricky one because I'm going to be serving this with a salty sauce. It's going to be served over rice, and you're going to use either tamari if it's gluten-free, or soya sauce, or maybe a teriyaki sauce. You could even use a teriyaki glaze on these. So salt isn't terribly critical in the meatball if you undersalt it. Certainly don't want to oversalt it though. So I'm going to use about a teaspoon's worth of kosher salt, and I'm not too concerned about undersalting these. The other reason I wasn't too concerned about salt is I'm going to add Worcestershire, so I'm going to throw a couple dashes of this in there, and then I'm going to mix this up with my hands. Now, a lot of people get irked about having to use raw hands, especially when working with ground poultry. You're going to wash your hands thoroughly after the fact, but it's really important to use your hands when mixing meatballs. You don't want this to turn into a paste. Using a spoon or a whisk is going to make it very difficult to leave this loosely packed and not turned into a really fine paste. And if that happens, when you cook it, all the moisture is going to leach out and cook out of your meatballs, and they're going to end up dry and solid. And that's not terribly enjoyable, and that's not the consistency that we're going for with these. So I'm going to use my hands. We're going to mix this until it's just combined, and everything's fairly evenly distributed, and then we're going to get this onto our baking sheet. The oven's going to be set for about 350-ish, and I expect these are going to take somewhere around 10 to 12 minutes to cook. Alright, so the oven's just about up to temp, and so we're now going to get these portioned out onto a baking sheet. Baking sheet's got parchment paper on it. You could be using a Silpat. You could use non-stick. This happens to be an aluminum baking sheet. The meatballs that I'm going to make are somewhere around a 1 ounce meatball. Somewhere between 2 and 3 tablespoons. I happen to be using a disher here. This is a scoop. Happens to be the scoop that I use for the most part when I'm making cookies, or used to make cookies. I happen to really like this size for meatballs as well. I fill it up, level it off, and then it does a great job of distributing it. I get nice even meatballs, and they don't end up terribly packed. They stay nice and loose and don't turn into meat pucks. You could use the 2 tablespoon method, where you use 2 tablespoons, one to scoop, the other to kind of shape and distribute back onto the pan. You could do this by hand if you like. Ends up getting a little bit messy, you end up with glue fingers, but any of these methods will work. Alright, so that was really good timing. The oven beeped just as I was washing my hands. These are a little tighter than I usually like to get them on the pan, but it seemed silly to have to break out another pan, so they're a little tighter than I'd normally do. But you can see they're pretty loose. They're not tightly packed. I haven't really rolled these in my hands. That's not how I like my meatballs particularly. I find that they end up drier that way. These end up with a bit more texture. They end up a little bit moist, or a little bit more moist than you would get with a packed meatball. So we're going to fire these into the oven and then check on them in about 10 minutes. Okay, while that's cooking, I'm going to put together a little bit of a sauce that I quite like with rice or with meatballs when we do this type of meal, which we seem to be doing more and more frequently these days. It's a Thai-style sauce, and I say Thai-style simply because it has citrus and peanut in it. So I'm using lime juice, tamari, which is similar to soya sauce but gluten-free. I've got some chili sambal paste. You could use sriracha sauce. If you don't have either of those, you could use some Tabasco sauce if you like. You could omit it entirely if you're not a fan of the heat. I've got some light peanut butter. We're not going to use a whole lot, maybe half a tablespoon for the entire portion of sauce. I've got some ginger. I keep this frozen in the freezer since we don't go through a lot of ginger, and I grate it using either my box grater or a microplane. I've got some sesame oil. Also, we're going to use a very small portion. It's very potent stuff. I'm going to use a little bit of Dijon mustard to help bind this together, and I'm going to just toss everything into this salad dressing shaker bottle. And I typically do this every week, and I like it just on plain rice or just rice and broccoli, and I keep it in the fridge. So we're just going to toss everything in here. I'm going to use almost equal portions lime juice to soy, and probably about not quite a half teaspoon of sambal, about maybe a hefty teaspoon of peanut, just a couple drops of the sesame oil, and about 1 clove of garlic, and the equivalent of grated ginger, and probably about 2 teaspoons worth of the Dijon mustard, just to help keep everything together once it's in the fridge, and it helps give a little bit of extra kick, especially if you're not using any sambal paste. Alright, so my sauce is done. This is definitely something you want to taste and adjust. It's going to be a personal preference as to what you like being a predominant flavor other than the lime and the soy or the tamari, whichever you end up using. You may skip the peanut butter, in which case you definitely want to use a mustard. If you're not a mustard fan, you wouldn't need to use it because peanut butter works as a pretty good binder as well. I like my heat in this sauce, so that's why I've added the sambal. The girls are probably going to end up having plum sauce or something like that. So now we just need to wait for our meatballs to finish. Alright, so we've just hit the 12-minute mark, and they're just starting to get brown on top. So I'm going to give these another minute or two and flip them over. Having them this close together has definitely made my cooking time extended. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to flip them over in a minute or so here, and then probably let them go for another 5 or 6 minutes until they're browned on the other side as well. Alright, so we're all done. They went for just about 20 minutes because I had some of them so tightly packed on the tray. They needed a little bit more time in the oven. I turned them halfway through, and they're ready to go. So we're going to get portions served up and let you know what the girls think. Alright, so here we go. My portion is with the peas, and then Riley is going to enjoy some leftover broccoli from last night. And we'll put the point breakdown and calorie breakdown up on the screen for you.
My meatball? Yeah, you have meatballs.
Is that yummy meatball?
There you go.
Yum, yum.
Thank you, what, guys?